Hello, I'm Kats, and welcome to today's video. So we have another lovely, my favorite content in the game, challenge tournament to talk about today, and it is the upcoming single faction only Fire Knight tournament. So this is, I guess, the last of the single faction challenge tournaments for the core dungeon. So Fire Knight is what we're going to be tackling today, and there's lots of options that kind of pop into your head when you think about Fire Knight, you know, demon spawn, dwarves, for example, with Newt, etc. So we'll definitely explore some of those concepts when we dive into my teams that I have to show, as well as diving into the index for kind of suggestions for you guys. Now, at the time of this recording, I'm just doing this a bit early just because I know this is going to be a longer video once I upload it and edit it and whatnot, but the Fire Knight tournament does start tomorrow, but by the time you're seeing this, it will be live already in the game. And so my expectation based off historical precedent is that the Titan event points that are going to be locked in this tournament are going to be at the 1750 milestone mark in this tournament. So it should be pretty par for the course. You can let me know if I'm wrong in the comment section down below. But yeah, so we can't really dive into the specifics of the tournament itself because it's not live yet, but there is always going to be some relentless gear in the top 4 finishing places. So like I always say, be sure to check your group to see if it's relatively easy. So if you go up, get the milestone that you need to get for the Titan event, but even so, if you go slightly above and beyond, you might be able to get yourself some relentless gear. So just be sure to check how competitive your individual group is. Now, jumping into the dungeon itself, let's talk about the best stages to farm. As I usually recommend when it comes to these niche challenge tournaments, there is absolutely no shame in dropping back down to normal mode and focusing your efforts there, just because you're going to have a much more pleasant experience and you're not really beholden to some of the intricacies of hard mode, in this instance needing a lot of freeze champions. So maybe if you have 4 newts on your account, then you can still do your standard hard mode team, but for the rest of us, it'll be a lot easier to complete this tournament if you drop down into normal mode. So assuming that is the case for you, then the best gear quality is going to be stage 25. The most efficient stage is going to be stage 20, the best points per energy, that being the definition of efficiency in this instance. And then also honorable mention to stage 16, which is Void Affinity. It's just a lot easier to do, and you still can get 6-star gear if you're just really struggling, or you have not a really fully fleshed out roster, or you're just kind of still in the progression phase and you don't really have a bunch of champions from a bunch of different factions to kind of put together, or I guess a bunch of champions from the same faction to put together to make a coherent team specifically for Fire Knight. Of course, Fire Knight is one of the more difficult dungeons to create a team that is good for the waves and the boss as well. So in my case, I built some teams around stage 25, but these types of strategies could be applicable to stage 20 and below, depending upon affinities, of course. But I kind of started off thinking, well, clearly I'm going to build a Newt team because Newt is strong in normal mode and hard mode Fire Knight, but it's actually not the fastest team. So I actually have 3 teams to showcase for you guys today. So we might as well dive into this one as we kind of talk through it. But this team is a pretty simple, straightforward composition. It's definitely more aggressive, so you can be a lot more safer if you want to go that way. But we're using Herndig here as our debuffer as far as AoE decreased defense, but he's also built like a nuker. I have Arnorn on my account, and he's another AoE nuker, but that could be any dwarf that you have that is a good AoE nuker. I have Morag Bronzelock in there, so you can see she does have the ally attack. Granted, it's only 2 allies, but mini ally attack is better than no ally attack when it comes to breaking the shield on the Fire Knight. Newt is Newt, of course. And then Brogni is kind of our proxy for a reviver. So if your team is dying or people on your team are dying, then you definitely would want to run, like a Melga or a Molly Tankard or something that would kind of revive your team and potentially provide some CC as well. But in this case, we're kind of going just hard aggro against the waves, not really worrying as much about dying because the Brogni shield is pretty darn massive and it will protect us in most cases. And just the way the enemy AI works, they're typically in this team going to go for Arnorn with their single target abilities, and he of course has his passive that will keep him alive. So they'd have to kill him or try to kill him, bring him down to 1 HP, and then also break the stone skin or have him take turns, I guess, more likely given their relatively low speeds. But as you can see there, basically we kind of lap them with a Brogni shield and we kind of replace it, and so we don't really have to worry as much about that being a problem. So yeah, this is definitely, like I said, not the fastest team that I have to showcase you, but this is just kind of a method to show a basic team centered around Newt, and then a bunch of wave clear and survivability to kind of get Newt to the boss. One thing about the AI overrides here is that for wave 2 here, I did turn off Morag's ally attack so that she has it ready to go for wave 3. And aside from that, basically everyone just starts off with their A1 to begin with. So you'll see here, everyone A1s, we get a couple of hits. Nude, of course, has a triple hitter, and then Arnorn has a double hitter, and then Morag is going to ally attack. So she's going to bring in 2 allies. Bad RNG there that we only brought in the 2 dwarves, 2 other dwarves that have a single target ally attack, but it doesn't really matter. That's the worst case possibility, and we're not really at risk of things going awry there. So we did get fortunate there. Hermdig kind of has free reign on the waves, more or less, and so we did get lucky that he happened to start off with his A3 ready to go, and that is a full turn meter suppression. And then Newt is going to use his A1, of course, to reduce the turn meter, but whenever he can, of course, he's going to use the A3. So this composition, and part of the reason why I didn't really use it is because you can see that we don't really have decreased speed. We don't on him. We don't have increased speed on our team. So the shield will go up at some point, and we're just kind of tanky enough to kind of tank the hit, so he's not going to really kill anybody, so we don't have to worry about that. But still, it's just not the most efficient way of doing the dungeon, and so that's why I opted to not actually use a dwarf team, just because I don't happen to have all the best champions. But for those lucky enough to have Admiral Black Tusk, the faction unity champion, or if you happen to have I think Osgren has an ally attack as well, that would be a little bit more reliable in terms of breaking the shield and or bringing in everyone, such that you bring in Newt more often with his A1, and then you can land the turn meter drop. But yeah, so this team is around 3 minutes or so. Let's hop in to team 2. Team number 2 is what you kind of might think when you first think of a Fire Knight composition, and this is, of course, Dark Elves. There actually was a Dark Elves challenge tournament for Fire Knight sometime last year, I think, and so I actually basically just remade the exact same team that I copied for myself. Lovely to have video footage of all of these things going forward. But yeah, so pretty straightforward. Once again, we'll just hop into the run to save time, but as we kind of talk through things. But Lydia now is our debuffer, so we just have a debuffing champion. We have double Cold Heart, of course, that is for the Fire Knight portion, so they're going to reduce his turn meter, but also the enemy max HP hit. Visix is going to be our CC champion, and as you saw right there, big nukes from the Rule the Huntmaster, so he is our wave clear champion. We're taking advantage of his double hitter ability once there's hex out there, so he places it, of course, on his A3, and he does have to, well, ideally he uses that before he uses the A2 so that we have hex out there on everyone. But you might notice it kind of, there's some hexes being applied there without him, and that is because Visix happens to be in a cursed set. But nonetheless, I do force Rule to use his A3 just in case she doesn't actually land hers. So yeah, he's strong enough without increased attack to basically kill the more squishy champions in the waves, but the Vrasks, of course, are HP based, and Nethril just kind of, I think he just low rolled on the Helm Smasher and whatnot, so we didn't really get maximum damage there. But yeah, the Vrasks are tanky enough to survive, but you'll notice here that we are getting through the waves a lot quicker than with the dwarves. So even though with the Arnorn and Hermdig combination alongside increased attack, we're just not gonna hit anywhere near as hard. Granted, my Rule the Hunt Mustard is fortunate enough to have a 6-star soul, so he does have 6-star crushing rend, which is of course a significant amount of damage. So same logic as the first team. Everyone starts off with their A1s, and then once the shield is down, we start launching into the Heartseeker cycles and kind of going from there. Rule is going to do his damage as much as possible. We of course have the hero reduction from the A1s of the Cold Hearts, so that can help us if he happened to get a shield, but that is basically impossible because Visix, as you can see there, has turn meter suppression on her A1, 30% whenever she does her A1, and she's basically just going to use her A1 and the A2 for decreased speed. And then we also have increased speed, of course, from Lydia. So we're going to stay ahead of the boss pretty much the entire time. You don't have to worry about him taking any turns once the shield is down. And basically, I think it takes 5 Heartseekers in total in order for us to kind of get the boss down, depending upon, of course, just how hard Rule happens to hit. And I think Cold Heart Prime on the left here is going to be coming back around to her Heartseeker to end the fight. So you can see there. Oh, no, not a little bit soon. It'd be Cold Heart 2 has hers. No, neither of them. Maybe Rule was going to finish him. Never mind. All right, Physics. There you go. War Master. Close enough. But yeah, you can see basically an order of magnitude faster, so we're closer to the 2-minute mark with a team like this. Again, 6-star Crushing Rend is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the wave DPS, but nonetheless, this is a pretty basic team with a nuker, a debuffer. This could be a Spider, I believe, in the faction. If you don't have Lydia yet, Visix you get for free. And then Cold Hearts are rares, void rares, but still void rares. Most people have a couple of Cold Hearts. built on their account. And the last team I have to show for you is basically a brute force method. So we have ally attack from Mikage. Let's start the run here. But we have ally attack from Mikage that will help us break the shield, of course. We have Leo in the mix because Leo is an AoE nuker of sorts. We have Mishinaki there as our primary AoE debuffer, but also, you know, Ninja can provide the single target decreased defense. And then we have Genbo the Dishonored because I just needed another wave clear DPS. So the goal here is just to try and get through the waves as quickly as possible. So Leo's doing his big damage there. And so it's a little bit faster on the waves compared to the other teams, just because we have, I guess, 4 nukers more or less, kind of doing some damage. But yeah, Mishinaki, once again, placing our AoE decreased defense. Wave 2 is a little bit slower just because we don't have our abilities fresh off of cooldown across the board. You know, Genbo didn't, you know, give himself increased crit rate there because his, I guess, Cycle of Violence kind of procced and kind of messed up a cycle. But luckily, the team is relatively speed tuned such that Ninja will come back around before they get their first turn, place the AoE freeze, and then they kind of lose the freeze, which allows us to do full damage by the time we come back around to the other nukers on the team. So there you go, a little bit of DPS. We're almost there. And I think, yeah, Ninja's going to carry us over. So about a minute to get through there. And then now, of course, Mikage is going to do her thing with the ally attack. Funny thing about Mikage in this team is, of course, she brings in Shadowkin with her A1, but the entire team is Shadowkin. So basically, it's kind of dealer's choice to whoever she brings in. Obviously, for this composition, Ninja will be the most, the strongest DPS to bring in. So he's the ideal candidate. And the faster runs are when Ninja gets the A1 proc. But honestly, you know, any of them will kind of do a decent amount of damage across the board. But yeah, so this team, once again, we're kind of, like I said, we're brute forcing it. There is no increased speed on our team. There's no decreased speed on him. And so we're basically just plowing through and ally attacking when we can to break the shield and kind of just go from there. But it is one of the faster compositions in general, just because, like I said, we have 4 nukers as compared to some of the other compositions we looked at earlier. However, I think this was a bit of a slower run, just, you know, closer to, you know, it's still around the same time, around the 2-minute mark, but it is a little bit faster than the Dark Elves team is kind of the point I wanted to prove. But yeah, there you go. 3 different sort of styles. We have, you know, the Cold Heart, carry them to the boss strategy. We have the ally attack with a bunch of nuker strategy. Like I said, the brute force. And then you have the more conservative kind of protector, nuker, carry the newt with the dwarf team. So really quickly, let's run through all the builds on these champions, on these teams. That's not necessarily meant for you to copy these exact builds, because I just have them built for the respective areas of the game where I use them on my account, and I just kind of throw them together when these types of challenge tournaments come about. So bear that in mind. Starting off with the dwarf composition, we have my Morag Bronzelock, who is built for the Cursed City. So you'll see that when we dive into her stats. But the resistance set, 1 piece of Mercurial for the extra, well, I guess that just happened to be a good gear piece, and then a resistance set as well. So you might guess she has high resistance. This is because she's primarily for, like, I think Frostbiter, Fire Knight type stuff, stages, and so I want her to be able to be unfrozen, unslowed by the boss, and so that she can ally attack at will and also counterattack. You know, just not be CC'd. But anyways, 51,000 on the HP, 4,300 on the defense. She is built to do a decent amount of damage. Nothing crazy though. Only a full crit rate, 238 on the speed, and then 209 on the crit damage, and then 476 on the resistance. So again, high to resist all CC, such that she can maintain her abilities and maintain her attack, so we can get down the Fire Knight shield as well as kill the Frost Spider. No relic on her because, like I said, she's just a Cursed City champion. She is fully booked. Of course, she is an epic. 1-star blessing. I put Crushing Rend on her. Obviously, that goes away once she takes 1 turn, or, you know, does her first hit. And so it would be nice to have her 6-star long term, but for now, she's just the 1-star. And then no masteries because she's a Cursed City champion on my account, so she's not in any of my core roles. Next up, we have the Mighty Newt on my account with the lovely Fire Knight skin, which was super fun to get from, like, I think a champion training tournament 2 or 3 years ago, give or take. But he is optimized personally on my account for the Scarab King. So, but if I did get a second Newt, I would probably build, you know, like a Reflex or a Merciless type build, a cooldown reducing set, maybe Relentless, depending upon the application, but I digress. This one is in Destroy in Perception, and his total stats are as follows: nearly 50,000 on the HP, 4,900 on the defense, 251 on the speed, 100% crit rate, 242 on the crit damage, and then 426 on the accuracy. A bit overkill, but he's kind of optimized for, I think, up and through Nightmare Chimera that week. He can land a decreased attack when it's on, when his A2 is on in certain forms. For the relic on him, I actually do have a Tempest Sanguineus, so it boosts the turn meter reduction effects. I think that should improve the turn meter drop on his A1, and I think it also works on the hard mode as well, just because it's effectively a turn meter reduction when you place a freeze. But I think you could have an argument that the Molten Death Bell, which boosts his turn meter instead, might be a little bit better on him for hard mode specifically, so I'll have to do a little bit of testing. But for now, again, this is my PvE, or I guess my dungeon focused, Doom Tower focused build on Newt, and so this is optimized more so for the Fire Knight and other iterations thereof. He is fully booked, of course, because he's Newt. He's very important, and I do have Soul Reap on him, so that when I do use him in bosses, he can kind of finish them off a little bit earlier to save time in runs. But ideally, 5-star, I guess, is kind of the near the maximum threshold. Well, I guess once you're at 5 stars, you're above the 10% cap, and so that's as hard as it's going to hit anyways. So the 6-star doesn't really do all that much extra. In terms of masteries here, pretty straightforward, mostly kind of doing the Crescent Moon that I like to mention for enemy or for champions who have triple hitters on their A1s, i.e. they go down to Giant Slayer, so basically the entirety of the offense tree. But notably Cycle of Violence, just because you can, even though you're hitting the max HP cap at 10%, it still counts as 30% sometimes, and so you can still get that 30% chance to reduce the cooldown of the A3, which is good. And then Support Tree, just mainly going down lower steel to get some stats, lots of accuracy boosting stuff along the way. Next up, we have my Underpriest Brogni, who's in a very, very unique build of a 6-piece protection and then immortal, and he's also built for a decent amount of damage. Once again, nothing crazy. He's a support after all, but it's hard to get attack on him, but nonetheless he does a little bit of damage. 75,000 on the HP, 25 or 2600 basically on the attack, 4k on the defense, 277 on the speed. Full crit rate, 219 on the crit damage. Mainly, a lot of that is the kind of the blessing and the relic. We'll see in a little bit. And I definitely built him for resistance. So 5 resistance. When I use him, I don't want him to get CC'd or controlled. I want him to be able to place the buffs and kind of purge debuffs on his A2 whenever he gets that off. But a little bit of accuracy as well if I happen to use him in stuff like this, so he can strip buffs as well in certain content that has a lower accuracy threshold. When it comes to the relic on him, I just have a Malefic Talon just to boost his crit damage, basically just a stat stick, nothing crazy there. He is fully booked, of course, because he's Underpriest Brogni. It used to be, a pinnacle of my Demon Lord Clan Boss team, but not so much anymore. Brimstone is the blessing I went on him just because he's primarily a PvE champion on my account. And then the masteries, again, these are old school as far as a Demon Lord Clan Boss, so Giant Slayer taking advantage of his passive, obviously as a single target hitter A1, but this works with this passive when you have the shield out there, so you reflect a lot of hits and you can get Giant Slayer procs from that. Offense tree, again, thinking Demon Lord Clan Boss thoughts, and then support tree, basically all the healing boosting masteries, because of course you do heal when his shield gets damaged. Next up, we have my Herndig, who was optimized for the Dark Fae fight in Savage and Perception. Total stats here are as follows: 46,000 on the HP, 5,600 on the attack, 253 on the speed, full crit rate, 284 on the crit damage, and then 400 on the accuracy. 350 plus is what you would want in order to get all the way up through stage 120 or floor 120 Dark Fae, and then 250 plus speed to be faster than the boss. Obviously you want him to, I guess, well, on my team he's the fastest champion by the time we get to the fight, so he's also kind of the wave clear champion on top of being a little bit of turn meter control as well. So super solid build. Another Malefic Talon on him, just again stat stick, give him some extra crit damage. Fully booked, of course, because I want him to cycle through his abilities properly. Crushing Rend on him, it's only 4-star, but I did get him in the Soul Merchant up to 4-star just to get the extra crit damage. Again, focusing more on the stats. Ideally, it'd be 6-star once again, and that would be even easier to kill the mirror copies. And then for the masteries, he is built as a kind of wave clearing PvE nuker on my account. So you have a lot of the kind of what you'd expect to see in classic PvP builds with, Heart of Glory, tagging with full HP, Ruthless Ambush, stuff like that. But again, for wave clearing, you want to be able to just do as much damage as possible quickly. And so that's kind of where that's centered around, ultimately ending on Helm Smasher. And then support tree, a lot of the accuracy boosting stuff as much as we can get, Lore Steel, Master Hexer, and stuff like that. Next up, we have my Arnorn the Shining. This is my PvP build for him in just a basic Savage set. Couldn't really get the 2-piece set on to match, just the stats are better on the broken set pieces, but a little bit of reaction as well. You'll see he's a very unique build on my account, with the relatively low HP, or I guess relatively high HP with the blessing, 41,000 HP, but 8.4k attack. He has a lot of attack in the build, and you can see why, because we basically want him as slow as possible to waste time and have people kind of kill him last. That way he can power up his passive and then just kind of nuke them down. That's kind of the strategy there. But 186 on the speed, full crit rate, 332 on the crit damage, so really, really high there on the crit damage and the attack. Again, I kind of want him to just kind of one-shot people. Once he procs his passive, I don't care about his accuracy or resistance. I do have a Thunderbolt Spear on him. He does ignore shields with his big hitting AoE ability, and so it's just kind of getting more damage if they happen to be under a shield. He does want to have, you know, a 5-star relic account. Fully booked, of course. I want to maximize his damage potential. Lightning Cage on him. That's a bit future-proofing. I haven't really managed to pull it off yet, but eventually I do want him in like a Savage and a Feral build, that combination, so that he has block Diva, so we can't get Carnage can't just come in and block his passives or something like that, so he's a little bit susceptible to that. But for now, he's just in Lightning Cage, you know, to kind of preempt that, so I don't have to spend the gems later on. And then for the masteries, Nuker, absolute PvE, or PvP rather, Nuker. So of course he's going to be low HP when he's proccing his passive, so we definitely want Grim Resolve instead. Getting basically straight line down to Helm Smash. We want to ignore as much defense as possible, and then kind of going the Z pattern with the defense tree so that he can counterattack, get some hard-hitting A1s in there as well whenever he can. Next up, we have my Cold Heart duo, and they have the exact same masteries, but they have 2 different builds, and they're optimized for 2 different situations. So this is my Scarab King Cold Heart, who's in Destroy alongside Newt and Perception, with the Blood Shield as well to kind of protect herself from the Scarab King. 42,000 on the HP, 3k on the attack. Don't care about her defense. 239 on the speed, 70% crit rate. That's all you need, because you get extra 30% for Heart Seeker on the A3, and then 280-ish% on the crit damage, and notably the 350 plus accuracy for Doom Tower hard bosses. She also has the Tempest Sanguinis that we saw on Newt for the same logic of boosting the turn meter reduction effects. And then fully booked, of course, she's a rare champion. Hero Soul, because there are some challenge tournaments that feature that I use my Cold Hearts on in Spider, and so she gets bonus damage if we're running stage 20, where you're not capped on enemy max HP. You get extra damage for each of the minions, which can add up to a decent amount of a bigger hit. And then I basically have the old school Masteries Honor, a Flawless Execution for the extra crit damage, kind of optimizing for that. Obviously, the max HP is capped, or enemy max HP damage is capped in most encounters, but again, for the niche situations where I need her in Spider tournaments, I want her to be uncapped for stage 20s type of stuff. You'll notice the masteries aren't fully done on Cold Heart 2, just because she doesn't really need it. Again, this one is primarily optimized at this point on my account just for the Scarab King. However, Cold Heart Prime is now in a 4-piece Merciless set, so I took her out of the Reflex, put her in the 4-piece Merciless. Ideally, like long term, she'd be a 9-piece Merciless, and that's kind of a work in progress. But getting her into 9-piece Merciless is not, my primary build for her. Obviously I want to get, a Rhodos or a Whisper in that along before I worry about getting a Cold Heart in it, but long term it would be nice to get her into that for the extra turn, as well as the ignore defense and the perception alongside that as well. For now, similar stats: 44,000 on the HP, 3,800 on the attack. Don't care about the defense. 256 on the speed, a little bit faster. Again, this is the Dark Fae build, so you do want her 250 plus, 70% on the crit rate, 245 on the crit damage, and then 350 plus once again on the accuracy. Same logic on the Relic, the Tempest Sanguinis. She is fully booked. This one has Phantom Touch because I want to kill the Dark Fae as quickly as possible, so getting the bonus damage from the 5-star soul kind of helps kill it faster, and so we just want to do that as quickly as possible. The masteries are a little bit different on this one, so I re-optimized this one because I do use her more in general. So she has Giant Slayer, so Flawless Execution. So when again, same mindset as the Blessing, is that when we're going against the Dark Fae, she uses her quad hitter on the A1. I want her to help us kill the boss as quickly as possible, and those runs take about like a minute to 90 seconds, so trying to optimize around that. But yeah, pretty standard PvE masteries there. Next up, we have my Chimera build, Lydia, who's currently in 6-piece protection, but long term I do want her in 9-piece Feral. Kind of waiting for the pieces to show up from Siege, but for now, 6-piece protection and perception. That's kind of optimized a little bit for Chimera, just to kind of protect our buffs whenever he does the buff strip in the base form, and also going into the Viper form. So total stats: 68,000 on the HP, 4k on the defense, 303 on the speed, so on the faster side, but that is kind of boosted by the protection set itself, of course. And then I have her in a high accuracy, high resistance build. The resistance is because I do use her as kind of my default debuffer when it comes to like Doom Tower bosses and whatnot. I don't want her frozen by the frostbiter. I don't want her provoked or burned by the magma dragon, etc. So I just want her to not have to worry about any of that. But she also has enough enough accuracy to land her stuff when it comes to Ultra Nightmare Chimera. So 500 plus is kind of the target on that one. And then for the Molten Death Bell, or for the Relic, we have the Molten Death Bell on her. This is optimized mostly for Chimera, so that when she places that Fear on her A1, or Fear or True Fear on her A1, which, spoiler alert, for the Blessing. But when she places that, she can get some turn meter, so it just kind of helps her cycle through on the RAM form of the Chimera. And then Fully Booked, of course, because she's Lydia, quintessential debuffer. And then Nature's Bounty is actually the Blessing on her. So I swapped her out of, I think, Brimstones, which she used to have. And sadly, it's only a 1-star for now, but eventually I'd like to get her to, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6-star, just to improve the fidelity of the chance to flip the basic Fear into a True Fear. Again, thinking of Chimera Endgame, Super Endgame there, but the True Fear prevents the reflection of the damage, which is just really, really good. And so the basic Fear only does half of it. So it's just a lot easier to keep your nukers alive if you can get True Fear off of her A1s. For the masteries here, in order to maximize her stats, I did go for Eagle Eyes, the tier 6, just to get extra accuracy. Again, optimizing her primarily for a Chimera, but just having enough resistance for all the areas that I mentioned. But going through Master Hexer, and then the defense tree, you want her to counterattack and all this stuff because again, in the Chimera, she can place the Fears on her A1s, and then have that be out there for when your nukers try to take their turns. And then we also have some of the tankiness, extra resistance type of defensive masteries as well. Next up for the Dark Elves, we have Visix, who I teased was in a cursed set. I have her in that set just because I had her in it for a showcase of early progression Hydra, because of course she's one of the best starter Hydra champions once you're getting going, but haven't really needed the set on anyone else, so she has just been rocking it since then. But cursed set and speed doesn't really need it for what we saw today, but it, I guess Hex is a little bit nice. Anyways, I digress. 51,000 on the HP, 3,500 on the defense, 259 on the speed, so just kind of fast, tanky-ish build, and then 350 accuracy, just in case I need to use her in Doom Tower Waves. I haven't used her for that in a long time, or I guess I kept her actually the same as when I used to use her in Doom Tower Waves, so 350 plus, kind of the target there. No relic on her, doesn't really matter, but she probably would benefit from another Tempest Sanguinis. I don't think I have another one because it's one of the more harder ones to get, even though it's rare. It's from a specific group. And then for the skills, fully booked, of course, Cruelty on her, but she does a lot of AoEs, so she can help lower the defense of our enemies. And then for the masteries, pretty basic stuff, standard PvE debuffer type thing. So we're coming down predominantly the left-hand side of the offense tree to War Master for the extra damage, and then support tree hugging the right-hand side, ultimately ending on Master Hexer to extend the duration of that decrease speed. You don't really need Sniper because everything she does is a 100% chance of landing. And last but not least, for the Dark Elves, we have my Nuker, Rule the Huntmaster, who's in a very specific type of build in lethal and crit rate set. One of the rare instances where I actually use the crit rate set, but still kind of savage build here. But yeah, cool, really cool stats on him, really cool build, but 48,000-ish on the HP, 6,000 on the attack, 239 on the speed, so on the slower side, full crit rate, 252 on the crit damage, and then 500 nearly resistance, and then 300 accuracy. So once again, kind of optimizing around the fact that he is 6-star awakened, so that's giving a bunch of extra stats. But the idea here is that when I use him as a nuker in hard mode faction wars, which I do, I don't want him to get CC'd by the enemies, and then because he can give himself increased accuracy, having a relatively lower amount of accuracy is enough because he'll give himself increased accuracy. So effectively he has 450 accuracy when he uses that buff, and so that's enough to land his Hex when he's doing that for the wave, so he can set himself up. Or I run him alongside Mithrala, who has a bunch of accuracy, so we can place the Hex that way. So 2 ways we can place the Hex. No relic on him. He could probably benefit from a Malefic Talon or something like that, just to give him a little extra stats. Fully booked once again, 6-star Crushing Rend, as I mentioned, because he's 6-star. And a little bit of masteries, but nothing crazy on him because he's basically just a faction wars champion at this point on my account. Moving on to the Shadowkin team. Lots of champions to go through this time, I apologize. But you can definitely skip to the next section if you're more keen to see that. Or you can just skip through whichever champion you might want to see the builds of. But yeah, this is my arena build for just quick farming, in case there's Swift Parry in a classic arena, but the Savage set, a little bit of Merciless as well, nothing crazy. It's definitely not my best Savage set. He's definitely kind of got the leftovers, so to speak. But 42,000 on the HP, 6.6k on the attack, 222 on the speed, 70% crit rate because he gives himself increased crit rate before, or I guess, and an extra turn off of his A3. 274 on the crit damage, and then we don't care about the accuracy or the resistance. He has a Malefic Talon, just a little bit of a stat stick. Yeah, fully booked because he's an epic. Heaven Cast because he gives himself a couple of buffs, but of course, if he was 6-star, Crushing Rend is probably the way to go. For the masteries, because I do use him in, again, quick farming for Classic Arena. Old school PvP mastery, so the first hit, making sure that's the hardest it can be. I have opportunities on him because I typically run him with Cornelia, and she puts the enemies to sleep. Elm Smasher, of course, is what we want to ignore as much defense as possible. Then the standard Z when it comes to the defense tree. Next up, we have my Mishinaki, number 1. I do have 3. But this one is a Hydra build, Hydra optimized Mishinaki. So he's in 4-piece Merciless with Perception alongside of it. So his stats are as follows: 55,000-ish on the HP, 46 or 4,700 almost on the attack, or on the defense, 269 on the speed, 100% crit rate, 244 on the crit damage, and then 417 accuracy. So he was formerly optimized for Nightmare Chimera, but he's currently now on the Brutal team, so technically he only needs about like 300-ish accuracy, but no point changing the build, despite dropping him in terms of difficulties. Noteworthy Coronet is definitely the best relic on him, again, optimized for Hydra. You place some debuffs and you stack up this and you get 30% extra damage over the course of the fight. Super powerful. We have fully booked, of course, because we want him to cycle his abilities properly. Brimstone is the choice on this one. You definitely could go for Nature's Wrath on him, but in this case, he's the only champion on the squad with Brimstone, so I definitely want to have that in the composition. But again, you can make the argument that you'd be better off with Nature's Wrath. For the masteries, pretty standard debuffer masteries here. So hugging the left-hand side of the offense tree, coming down to War Master, support tree, predominantly hugging the right-hand side, and ending on Sniper Master Xer, but definitely going to Cyclo Magic because we don't really care about Evil Eye, and the Hydra can't control their turn meter at all. Next up, we have Leo, who is built in a PvP build. Granted, I don't really use him that much anymore in a PvP. I've kind of disappointed long-term with Leo. I definitely use Donnie a lot more on it without Leo. But anyways, I digress. So he is in Lethal and Fulja and 3-piece Stone Skin. For those who know, you know. But yeah, for the extra stats of defense, I guess, in that case. But yeah, basically just a savage build. 52,000 on the HP, 7.2k on the defense. He 222 on the speed. He does have defense percentage on the boosts, so so that's why his defense is so high. Way overkill on the crit rate, but that's just kind of the nature of the leftover gear. 236 on the crit damage, and then we don't care about the accuracy or resistance. In terms of a relic, I have the aspect of Seroth on him so that, when they try to kill him, initially he survives and can put the stone skin on himself. But again, I don't really use him as much anymore. Fully booked, of course, want to maximize his damage. Lightning Cage to protect his buffs. He has plenty of buffs in his kit. Don't want them to get ripped off, and especially the stone skin. And then for the masteries, once again, kind of optimizing around, kind of like Arnorn, where usually if you're proccing his passive, you're going to be below 50% HP, so Grim Resolve. And then a lot of the kind of first hit wonder type of mastery build here with the Helm Smasher, of course. And then on the defense tree, we're making it on the other side just so he can, heal himself a little bit. If he gets above 50%, you can reproc the passive and stuff like that. And so, yeah, delay death, counterattacking, of course. All that good stuff. Next up, we have my ninja build, who is in 2-piece Feral and 6-piece Merciless. Once again, 9-piece Merciless being the long-term goal on him, optimized for Chimera in this case, but also use him in Hydra. But yeah, you can see we're basically just missing the amulet. I'd like a crit damage amulet with or without accuracy, and then I could hopefully fit him into a 9-piece Merciless build. So we're getting close to a lot of 9-piece Merciless on a lot of my champions, but we're just kind of missing 1 or 2 accessories here and there. But I digress. 44,000 on the HP, 7,000 on the attack, 214 on the speed. You don't really need that much speed when you're running him alongside Mikage, because he basically A1s at the speed of her. 100% crit rate, and then 316 on the crit damage. This is one of my better builds. He is 6-star Awakened. I got lucky with that from the Soul Stones. And he does have Crushing Rend, of course, on him for that. And then 460 on the accuracy. Again, thinking of Ultra Nightmare Chimera, we want to be able to land that burn for the trials. Noteworthy Coronet. This is the only 4-star Coronet on my account, just mainly to boost his stats a little bit higher, the attack, the extra accuracy. But that's definitely where I'm going to stop. In terms of the skills, fully booked once again, 6-star Crushing Rend, as I mentioned. And then the masteries. These are definitely kind of old at this point. You could argue that, given how much defense he's ignoring, it might be better to go Helm Smasher instead of the War Master build, but I'd have to pay the 150 gems. But it's something I'm considering to kind of do a little bit of a test to see if it's better. But it'd basically be the same Master Race, then just curve over to Helm Smasher right at the end, and then support tree, basically standard debuffer stuff on the right-hand side of the support tree. Last but not least, for the champions being used, Lady Mikage on my account. My primary Lady Mikage, I do have two, but I only use the one at least for now. But she's in speed and relentless and pinpoint more recently just to get a little bit more speed. But yeah, this is Chimera optimized, but also use her in Hydra as well, of course, to power up the ninja. Total stats, 86,000 on the HP, 3,200 on the defense, 313 on the speed, so pretty darn quick, and then 500 on the accuracy. So definitely biased towards speed, but we're getting as much accuracy as we possibly can just because it helps her in her kit. Perched Shadow, of course, that pairs extremely well with champions who use Relentless because you can kind of chain extra turns back to back to back. Fully booked on both forms in this case, but the form we care about, of course, is form 1. Temporal changes the blessing on her, and I'm considering changing that to Brimstone just because I don't really use her as much as I used to in PvP instances, at least like, thinking live arena type things. And so for Chimera, I don't think after I took it off of Lydia, there is no one with Brimstone on my team, that we're just kind of missing out on damage. So I kind of want to get that back in the composition. For the masteries, I might change these as well eventually, kind of switching more to the PvE build because, like I said, I don't really use her as much in PvP. But for now, she does have Eagle Eye for the masteries for the accuracy. A lot of the accuracy boosting stuff on the support tree and the defense tree. Kind of this is what I call the anti-Siphi route, where you go Wisdom of Battle so that you can't get permaslept. But yeah, like I said, I might change these, might re-optimize it around PvE, because that's primarily where I use her. Like hard mode Fire Knight, she's my ally attacker, and then for Chimera, she's the Chimera, and Hydra, she's the ninja enabling champion. So I might as well get more master damage out of her. I might, I'll consider it. We'll see. All right, so the last thing to do is to talk about just in general what kind of strategies you're looking for when it comes to hard mode Fire Knight. We did showcase 3 different factions you could use, and so we'll kind of speed run those once we get there. But just kind of talking about the types of champions you might want to use in case you're not going to build any of these specific styles of teams that we looked at specifically in this video. So the 2 categories that you're going to be looking for are champions who are ally attackers that will help you break the shield. You could also use counterattack, but you need to be relatively slow and we kind of wait for the boss to get a turn for counterattack to work, and so it's just not as effective compared to ally attack. You're typically going to be faster than the boss, especially on normal mode, so that's kind of where you want to lean more into. And then of course turn meter control if you can get it. As we proved with the Shadowkin team, it's not mandatory to have turn meter control at all, but it does help keep the shield down if you don't want to worry about him healing a little bit, if you don't have heal reduction, or just kind of wasting a bunch of strong abilities into the shield, as we kind of saw with the Shadowkin comp. All right, let's dive right in, starting off with the High Elves. There's really nothing to talk about in the Banner Lords. When it comes to turn meter control, Lyssandra's kind of your best bet. She has the turn meter depletion, single target. She has one of the best speed manipulation abilities in the game, with the increased speed, increased turn meter, decreased turn meter, and then of course the speed in all battles aura, so she can keep your team running super fast. And then in terms of ally attack, I still use him on my hard mode Fire Knight stage 16, but Lanatharel here, you can also get him from the new Fusion Exchange system for a decent value, but brings in all allies with the ally attack, so super strong for breaking that shield. Sacred Order, when it comes to turn meters controls, believe it or not, we go all the way down to the uncommons. You could definitely whip out your Armiger if you're really struggling and you're committed to the Sacred Order team. Lady Noelle Cernic to kind of keep you alive and do damage for the waves, and then Armiger can be your turn meter control, kind of a mini newt, so to speak, in terms of enemy max HP and turn meter control on the A1. When it comes to ally attackers, though, I'm not going to highlight anyone who only brings in 2 allies. We want to have 3 or more allies, so we're going to skip Lady Tessa. But if you're fortunate enough to have Cardio, then of course he does have the full team ally attacker on the A3, super strong as well. And of course on hard mode, it protects you from the debuffs of the Fire Knight if he does happen to get a turn, so it's kind of a nice bonus. Definitely kind of best in class for Fire Knight in general. Next up, we have we just did Sacred Order. Barbarians, there we go. So we have a decent amount of options for turn meter control. Armand's, of course, locks down the waves, but technically you can also steal the turn meter from the boss, so you might as well use that ability if you have it. But the best in slot for that is, of course, your Carl once you get to the boss. course, he works on hard mode Fire Knight, but even in normal mode Fire Knight, this is still a turn meter steal, 100%, and decrease speed and increase speed on himself. So it's a really good turn meter manipulation against the boss. And then if all else fails, you could definitely drop down. Soul Bond Boyer has a turn meter depletion here on a 4-turn cooldown on the A3, but that's kind of if you're desperate. Obviously, you get your card from the clan shop, so most of you should have access to him. And then when it comes to breaking the shield, of course, the best ally attacking epic in the entire game is Farrakhan the Fat. So he is in here. So I thought about making a Barbarians team, but it's just a little bit of a pain with the affinities because I only have War Maiden built as far as debuffers, and I'd have to build out like an Armina or maybe Jetney to kind of do it, and I just didn't really feel like it. But Thor could be the DPS and what like that for those who did the fusion. Next up, we have the Ogren Tribes. There's no ally attacker that I could think of or see in this faction, but you do have a couple of turn meter suppression options if you wanted to go that way. I don't think this is a good faction to use in Fire Knight, but nonetheless mention that Lauren the Cutter does have a full turn meter depletion here on a 4-turn cooldown, and then Maneater, believe it or not, has a full turn meter steal on his A2 on a 3-turn cooldown. So they can work, but again, it's kind of hard to make that work against Fire Knight in general. So don't recommend the Ogren Tribes. Same thing with the Lizardmen. Rosin technically has a turn meter drop on a 6-turn cooldown, but that's exactly not what you want to see when it comes to the Fire Knight. And yeah, once again, no ally attacker. We're not going to count Teox's A1. For the Skinwalkers, we don't have a lot of turn meter control, but there is an ally attacker in Longbeard, so that can help you break the shield. And depending upon, Brackus, has a sextuple hitter, so if you want to use that into the shield as well. But most people, I'm just bringing this up to bring out, if you're going to run some sort of Marius composition, then ideally you would have Longbeard help you break the shield, and then after that Marius can do Marius things and basically kill the boss as quickly as possible. Next up, we have the Orcs, and so Kriya the Witch Arm is kind of the mention here. Once again, bringing in 3 allies isn't the best because there are 5 allies on the team, or 4 allies alongside you on a team, but so someone's going to be left out. But nonetheless, it's better than 2, better than 1. But yeah, so she's the ally attacker for the Orcs. And then most people aren't going to use him for this application, but nonetheless, Gomlock, Skyhide, who you get from the Doom Tower Hard, he can steal some turn meter here from them on a 2-turn cooldown when booked. So it's a fairly reliable turn meter steal, which can effectively control the boss's turn meter, again, because he's relatively slow by comparison to however you're going to build him. Next up, the Demon Spawn. We have a couple of mentions here. Honorable, I would say, to Carnage, because obviously you have to be doing high levels of the Cursed City in order to have him, but he steals 100% of turn meter on a 3-turn cooldown even when unbooked on his A3 in the base form, so that can be a way to control the boss. And then more realistically, for most people who are not in the end game already, Skimfos, same thing, turn meter steal here on a 3-turn cooldown. So you can run them together, you can run each one individually, but either way, once you get to the boss, they can be your turn meter control champions. But Skimfos does have decreased speed in his kit as well as decreased attack if you're worried about dying. And then there are no ally attackers to talk about in this particular faction, but I guess honorable mention to Krutraxa, who is a good single target damage dealer who can break the shield very quickly, but also deal a lot of damage to the boss. For the Undead Hordes. For the Dark Elves, there we go. Next up, we have a couple of, obviously the champions we saw on my team. Visix with her A1. She also brings decreased speed on the A2. You have Sylar, I'll mention, because she does have a relatively strong turn meter drop here, 40% with decreased speed. But it's on a 4-turn cooldown, but nonetheless, it can be a decent move once the shield is down. And then, of course, Cold Heart. That's mostly what you're going to be using, as you saw there on my team. Double Cold Heart, more than 1 Cold Heart, or more than 2 Cold Hearts, whatever you got. But it could definitely help you kind of blitz through the waves. And then on my team, because all the champions were fast enough, we didn't really have to worry about it, but also Cold Heart having the quad hitter kind of makes it relatively easy to break the shields. But if you were struggling, or you only have 1 Cold Heart, and you do happen to have Lanicus the Chosen, then she can be your ally attacker. Once again, it's a 3 random allies, so someone's going to be left out, but more often than not, you're going to bring in most of the people who are important to help you break the shield. So she can definitely do that job. She also has, extra turn kind of in her kit, so she can kind of cycle through her abilities, get back to the ally attack a little bit sooner than some of the other champions who have ally attacks in their kits. Next up, we have the Knights Revenant, and the only thing to mention here is the ally attack of Queen of Hearts, my most wanted legendary on my account. Fun fact. But yeah, pretty straightforward. Increased attack. It brings in everyone. Decreased defense there. Of course, the decreased defense is not going to land when the shield is up, but nonetheless, 4-turn cooldown AoE ally, a full team ally attack. For the dwarves, we showcased a decent amount of them, and I mentioned them in the run. But you know, if you have Osgren, or if you happen to have him, he has this ally attack here, brings in everyone, increase stack and shatter, so you can do a decent, or ridiculous, I should say, amount of damage once the shield is down, and you're free to do maximum damage. But also Admiral Black Tusk, faction unity champion. But if you do happen to have him, you get a full cleanse here, and then the ally attack with their default skills. So 2 options in the dwarves for ally attacking. And then of course, turn meter control, Newt. We saw Herndig with his A3. There's also Geomancer. Technically, once you get to the boss, once the shield is down, you can steal some turn meter with the A3. And then honorable mention to Filja, who also has a turn meter steal on her A2, or full turn meter depletion, full turn meter depletion on her A2. Depending upon the affinity, she can also help you, once the shield is down. But honorable mention, not the best champion for that role. For the Shadowkin, we highlighted Lady Mikage, of course, the most accessible mythical ally attacker in the game, I could say. And then in terms of turn meter control, one of the more recent fusions, Yukimasa, Demon of Ice, he does have this turn meter steal here, once again on a 3-turn cooldown. Does a decent amount of damage as well, but it's again just a little bit of turn meter control. I don't have him booked on my account, so it doesn't really make sense. He's not really built super well on my account, so like I said, we just kind of brute forced it with a bunch of nukers. But technically he could do that role if you haven't booked, you haven't built. He can also help you nuke the waves, but also be turn meter control. That way you skip the part, as you saw with my team, that we had the shield come back up, presumably because you can control the turn meter for long enough for Ninja to kill the boss if you have Ninja on your team. Last up, we have the Sylvan Watchers, and the thing to highlight here is the ally attack from Grand Oak Padraig, or Patrick. It's a lot easier to say. But yeah, definitely more of a Fire Knight hard champion, because he restores destroyed max HP, then brings everyone in, and then he also has the turn meter fill and the cleanse, and then increased speed. So definitely more optimized, decreased cooldown on the A1 as well, and the speed aura in dungeons, I guess, is kind of the main appeal. So on my list of champions who I'd like to have for like a fully optimized hard mode Fire Knight team, but Lady Mikage, Lenathril suffice for now. All right, so that's going to do it for my strategy for the single faction Fire Knight tournament. Definitely a longer video this time, but I kind of got carried away building teams, and all 3 of them kind of worked. And then I'm probably going to end up just running the Dark Elves team, just because it's the cleanest so far. It's not the fastest team, not the absolute fastest, but it's the cleanest team. The shield stays down the whole time, and we just kind of sacrifice a little bit of speed on the waves, just because Rule has to cycle back through his abilities, and he's just not powerful enough, on my account at least, to fully one-shot the waves each time he uses his A2. But yeah, just the cleanest run. Shield stays down, we don't have to worry about it coming back up, and we just have a trifecta of turn meter suppression here on the wave. So this is the team I'm probably going to be running for the tournament once it goes live. But just again, wanted to highlight 3 different approaches to this, to kind of give you guys some inspiration of teams that you could put together to build good Fire Knight teams. Let me know in the comment section down below what team you're going to be running for this tournament, assuming you're going to be participating and chasing down those timed event points. And as always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit the like button down below, really just help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on the channel, for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.